Let's start, though, with the federal government's plan to address sexual misconduct within the military's ranks. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan says current efforts aren't working and the military's culture needs to be transformed. Here are the key steps he announced today. Former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour will lead an independent review of the military's policies and culture. She will provide concrete recommendations on setting up an independent external system for reporting sexual misconduct outside the chain of command. That's something that was recommended 6 years ago when another former Supreme Court Justice, Deschamps, did a review of sexual misconduct in the military. Arbour will also be looking at the military's structure, particularly how leaders are selected and trained. She will provide recommendations on how the military can better support complainants and ensure every incident is handled properly. Harjit Sajjan is the Minister of National Defence. He joins us now from Vancouver. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Why does your government, Minister, need another independent review to set up an external reporting system for sexual misconduct that was recommended more than 6 years ago?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Madame Deschamps for the work that she did that really put a microscope on the sexual misconduct within the Canadian Armed Forces. And the work that was started has made progress. But we have seen in the last few months that survivors who have come forward do not have faith in the system that's there. So we need to be even more bold, and that's exactly what we're doing. The work that Madame Arbour will be doing on the terms of reference that she has is going to be far broader than Madame Deschamps' work, and this is going to look at very deeply on what external system is going to be needed that's going to be independent of the chain of command. And so we're looking, going to be extremely bold, extremely wide to making sure that we get this right. Plus, we're going to move very quickly with the work that Lieutenant General Carry-On will be moving on as well.
Let me just dig down, though, into what you're saying about how bold what's happening will actually be. Because, in fact, what Madame Deschamps did recommend, though the parameters of this review might be a bit different or more broad as you characterize them, what she did recommend was very specific. The third recommendation and the fourth in her report back in 2015, create an independent centre for accountability for sexual assault and harassment outside of the Canadian Armed Forces, allow members to report incidents of sexual harassment and sexual assault to the Centre for Accountability. You did not implement that in the last 6 years. Again, why do you need another review to do so?
So actually, when it came to reporting, I mean, the independence of the SMRC that was created, yes, it was created, but obviously this has not worked. Well, we have a fundamental issue, and a concern is that survivors do not feel comfortable because of fear of reprisal. The chain of command and the power dynamics that it creates is a concern here. And this is what we're doing right now is how do we look at creating a structure that's going to be completely independent. This will require not just from a reporting side, we're going to be looking at from reporting, how does the member get the support? If they choose to, what type of legal advice is going to be needed in the process, plus the investigative side. Now, I don't want to presume which direction that Madame Arbour will be going, but these are the bold type of changes that we're looking at. An actual, an external body, person that's going to be not military, that's going to be able to take bold action immediately and hold people accountable regardless of rank or position.
With respect, though, Minister, is it disingenuous to use a term like immediately? That kind of bold action, once again, was recommended 6 years ago. Why did you not heed the advice earlier? Do you regret not heeding that advice?
No, actually, we did take the advice, and what we've also seen in the actions and the work that was done, this was clearly not enough. And I'm here to admit that there are survivors who have come forward. Clearly, this has clearly shown us that they do not have faith in the current process that we have in place. The process that we had in place did not work. It did not work for the previous government. It did not work for us. And this is why we want to take even a bolder step. We have to look at possibly here actual changes to organizations and possible legislation to get the proper authorities to be able to change that. That's that process that we're talking about. And we want to be bold enough that it actually gives confidence to our survivors and hold perpetrators to account.
I guess, Minister, what I'm wondering is how you didn't recognize it wasn't bold enough earlier, because though it does heed some of the advice Madame Deschamps put forward, the centre that you're talking about, really all it does is provide advice for victims or for survivors, right? It doesn't actually do what she had recommended. Did you not realize in the past 5 years that what you were putting forward was not bold enough?
Well, actually, we were looking at things as this was put into place. Every single year, we're constantly monitoring how things were going. We were looking at various when it comes to misconduct that we didn't need something even more independent. And but what we have seen here, because of the significant concern that survivors have brought forward to us and the allegations that have been brought forward, we needed to work even faster on this. And that's exactly what we're doing now, is taking that bold step to create that permanency so that it can be long lasting. But we're also putting into place immediate steps that Lieutenant General Carrion will be leading on to look at bringing all the kind of the different supporting mechanisms that we have across the different services, bring it under one leadership so we can immediately start supporting survivors while the permanent solution that Madame Arbour will be recommending. And I also want to say we're not going to wait for the report to be finished. What we're going to be doing is when there's interim recommendations, General Carrion and the Secretariat will be looking at how we can immediately start actioning these recommendations.
So when do you expect the first of those recommendations to come your way?
Well, I can't give a timeline on it, but I'm. It could be within in months. It could be a little bit longer. We want to move as fast as possible. We do need to get this right. The last thing we want here, in this case here, Vashi, is far too often, and even our members have seen announcements that are made. Announcements don't give confidence here. Actions do, and that's the actions that we're taking now, and we need to live up to that. So. We want to move very quickly. We, for example, have listened to the survivors that have come forward. For example, our survivors that have been asking for peer-to-peer support, greater support for the SMRC, military sexual trauma. We've outlined that. In fact, actually, we put it in our budget. So we're taking those actions very seriously. What we have seen in the last few months is absolutely unacceptable, and we want to work faster and harder on this.
Again, Minister, though, with great respect, is it disingenuous to characterize those people who have come forward as just over the last few months? Your own department just released figures that show there were 581 reports of sexual assault in the Canadian military over the past 5 years, and another 221 incidents of sexual harassment. This is not a new phenomenon.
No, this is absolutely not. In fact, actually, the reports that you're talking about is something that we were looking at in terms of monitoring, not just the numbers, but we actually also opened up where there were unfounded cases that were looked to in the past that were unfounded. We reopened those ones. This is something that we have been taking very seriously. And then as the reports got higher, we also as more reports come in, it also means that people are taking advantage of the system. But what I'm saying in the last few months, we have seen and heard very directly and passionately by survivors that the system did not work for them. And this is why we need to do more. So what I'm saying here is the actions that we took where we thought that we're actually having an impact, we need to go even bolder and faster on this.
Are Madame Arbour's recommendations binding? Will you follow each and every one of them?
Absolutely. And not only this, what we want to do is making sure that they are bold. This is one of the reasons why, given her experience, and most Canadians knows exactly her background, not just from as a Supreme Court justice, but also her work that she's done in the United Nations, the work that she's done at The Hague, going after war criminals, making sure that we have a system in place that that can hold perpetrators account. She's been able to do that. We also need to look at all the mechanisms that we have. We have to put a process that can also be tested in court. We need a process in place that builds the confidence and gives the power back to the survivors. So we were willing to take bold actions, but we want to get this right. The last thing I want here is just to make an announcement and say something is independent. I wanted to make sure that we had the right person taking a look at this, and that's why the terms of reference for Madame Arbour is far greater than the tremendous work that Madame Deschamps had already done. And
we'll speak to Madame Arbour in just a moment, but I'm thinking of all the people we've spoken to over the past number of years who have come forward, and I hear you saying, they don't want another announcement, and I wonder how much of that you are responsible for, or you should feel responsible for, and I mean that with great respect. But when you say the word bold over and over again, you had 6 years to bring in something bold. Again, I know that the complaints lately have risen to the highest ranks, but there have been complaints and there have been allegations for years and years and years. And your government has said that it is a feminist government. It has said that it is here to defend the rights of survivors. And, you know, in this instance, it really doesn't appear that you have been. What do you say to survivors who are listening tonight, listening right now, and hearing you say the word bold over and over again, and not really believing that you're going to follow through on it?
No, first of all, the actions that we have been taking from the time that we formed government, from the survivors that have come forward, what I say to them is absolutely we are taking them seriously. This is why we're taking the strong actions that we are right now. When we formed government and the defense policy that we put forward and the consultations that we conducted, this is one of the reasons not only why we put people first in chapter number 1 in the defense policy, actually putting in policies in place from the get-go of putting the GBN plus analysis done for everything that we do, changing the policies, getting PLC 77 passed in law. There's a lot of work that has been done. But what I'm saying here is sometimes even when you're going down a path of trying to do as much as you can, well, guess what? We need to do even more. And given the horrible story, the experience that our survivors had to go through, we need to go even bolder. And that's one of the reasons why we're taking the actions today.
So people who are watching right now, who are wondering, when might I be able to report this outside my chain of command? What can you tell them? Well, is this another year away, another 2 years away? Does it depend on the re-election of your government?
No, not at all. In fact, actually, the permanency of the system that Madam Arbour will be working on, that's the longer term. This is one of the reasons why we didn't want to just do a deep review. This is one of the reasons why we have created a new position that Lieutenant General Jenny Carrion will be commanding, taking all the different programs that we have.
But I'm asking about the external center, the external review mechanism. When will that be set up?
So that'll be based on Madam Arbour's work. For good reason, what we've also done here is that any interim recommendations will be acted upon immediately, but we've also taken an immediate step as well. So I would like to go as quickly as possible, but I want to make sure we get this right. And I know that Madam Arbour is deeply passionate about this as well.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, as always.
Great. Thank you, Bashi.
Harjit Sajjan is the Minister of Defense. The person, as the Minister mentioned, leading this independent review into harassment and sexual misconduct in the military is Louise Arbour. She previously served as a Supreme Court Justice and is now a senior counsel at BLG Law Firm. Madame Arbour joins us from Montreal. Hi there. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
My pleasure.
Can you describe for us, from your perspective, what your role is?
Well, actually, it's quite a broad-based mandate, which is what persuaded me that, 6 years after my former colleague, Marie Deschamps, looked at that issue, that it was actually really worthwhile engaging in this exercise. So on the one hand, there is 6 years later, after I think Marie Deschamps exposed quite an astounding amount of sexual misbehavior in a range of conduct, ranging from actually violent behavior to persistent harassment and so on, that we're not, you can't wait another 20 years to get back to it, considering what's been happening in the meantime, which is certainly a lot of evidence of a continued sort of prevalence of this sexualized culture, and it would appear the inadequacy of the measures currently in place to address it. Now, she called in her report for the putting in place of an independent mechanism, center, outside, external to the Canadian Armed Forces. What has been put in place, I think, will have to be reviewed to see if it's adequate to the task. Different people have a different understanding of what independent and outside means. For some people, stepping just a little outside the chain of command would provide enough guarantees. This doesn't appear to be the case. What should a completely independent outside mechanism of what? A center for denunciation, investigation, disposition of matters. So that opens up the issue of military justice and its adequacy. And frankly, this is not a problem that is unique to the armed forces. We're not doing exactly brilliantly, I think, in the eradication and prosecution of sexual harassment, sexual sexual offenses, sexual misbehavior. But in this particular subculture, I think it's very challenging to get the buy-in to put in a system that will work.
So let me ask you, Madame Arbour, is your mandate to actually determine whether what's being put in place already is effective or not? Or is it to design what would be a more effective system and more quote unquote independent and external? Because the minister seemed to imply that, they acknowledge what's in place now is not enough, and that something needs to be more outside the chain of command, and that you would be tasked with essentially providing the recommendations that they say they will implement to design such a system.
Yeah, it's both. It's part of this. Presumably, we're going to have to try to figure out why. What are the current continued existing barriers to women, victims, survivors coming forward to report? So what are the continued barriers to that? And what's the adequacy or inadequacy of the current mechanisms in place when these allegations are made? And this is, as I said, covers a wide range of conduct that seems to be still very prevalent. There's another pillar, I have to say, to my mandate that I think tackles the issue quite differently and very appropriately. I'm going to look at the entire recruitment, training, performance evaluation, and promotion, particularly to the higher ranks of command position, to see whether that is facilitating this profound culture change that has to take place, or whether we're looking at an institution that still is blind to this very toxic environment and values or exaggerates the value of operational effectiveness in the ranks. Until that is looked at and we understand what are people's expectations of their career in the military, and not just the rules and procedures. I want to look at what's happening in reality. I think that's going to be an important way, I think, for this institution to step up.
I'm sure you have, over the past number of months and even years, heard from many or read about many survivors who are concerned about a lack of action. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, as now someone tasked with providing a roadmap for action, what your message to those survivors is, and in particular, those survivors who don't believe that there can be systemic change, either vis-a-vis the government or the military itself.
Well, first of all, I don't want to raise expectations with respect to individual cases. Not only that's not within my mandate, but I'm specifically directed not to make any findings or conclusions regarding individual cases. This is not an investigative body for individual cases. So in that sense, I can understand the frustration of those who wonder, when will we get it right? But again, I want to stress that this is not unique to the Canadian Armed Forces. The challenge that we have as a society to eradicate this discriminatory culture that allows predatory practices to continue, not only to exist, but in some cases to flourish and permit people to move through ranks in this kind of environment. But so I think even in this civil society, we still struggle with that. We struggle with that within enterprises, in the private sector, public sector. But to design something that will be, indigenous to the particular cultural environment of armed forces, I think this is an opportunity, I hope to get it right, to do something that will generate enough buy-in internally and externally to make this work. As I said, I don't have any, well, there's been a lot of calls for, it should be a system that's completely outside everything and reports to Parliament. Well, I understand that. One has to look at what exactly do we mean by that? An oversight of systemic issues or the actual handling of individual cases? And can we really think, which I think would be very naive, that there'll be a huge culture shift and change in the armed forces simply if we tighten up prosecutions for misbehavior? I don't think so. I think this is naive to invest too much in the kind of general deterrence of denunciations and prosecution. It's an important step. It currently doesn't seem to be working very well, but I think there's a lot more than that that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I take your point. I think the focus, right. I take your point on that. I think the focus on that is derived largely from the words of Madame Deschamps back in 2015, right? In her stress on that recommendation as being so central and as having had some success in other jurisdictions, and the failure of the military or the government to be able to implement something that matched kind of what she had recommended. I'm not sure anyone sees it sort of as a maybe silver bullet, certainly not the survivors we've spoken to, but as indicative of sort of a resistance to change.
In fact, another thing that she recommended, and this is something that is endemic in a lot of large institutions, she said you have to streamline. You cannot have a multiplicity of venues. So you could go to this and to your commander and to this administrative system, or you could, no. And that's why I think one of her recommendations was to create this kind of centralized body. The question is, 6 years later, certainly on the basis of the work that you and your colleagues in the media have done, has this delivered? Doesn't seem to be the case. So again, a multiplicity of initiatives sometimes looks good, but produces, if anything, more confusion, less buy-in by those who need to reach into the system. So yeah,
do you
I
have
can't judge.
Do you have right? Pardon me. Do you have a sense, just before I let you go, of how long this work will take?
Well, the terms of reference refer to a year. And again, I have to say, I think the constraints that are put on all our work by the pandemic, I mean, there are some people that I, in an ideal world, would like to see personally. So we have a year with the opportunity of making interim recommendations. Now, I'm wary about jumping the gun, and I want to make sure that we go very deep into the issues and that we've covered all angles. But if there is an opportunity in the course of this work to make some corrections to the system, I'm certainly more than willing to act on that. But at the outset, I think we're looking at a year for the design, I think, of this initiative.
Okay, Madame Arbour, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for making time for us this evening. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.